High hopes for Paris Climate Change Summit. Thank you for joining us for another Bank of Cardiff newscast. 6 years after the last summit in Copenhagen failed to reach a binding agreement, all the usual suspects are once again poised to gather, this time in Paris, in an effort to strike a deal on the thorny subject of climate change. The 21st Conference of the Parties, COP, of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change will play host to the governments of more than 190 nations with the aim of reducing global greenhouse gas emissions. Existing commitments on greenhouse gas emissions expire in 2020, so an agreement will be expected to cover action over the next 10 years or so. Scientists have been warning of the imminent danger presented by the uncapped proliferation of greenhouse gas emissions, especially if we pass the threshold beyond which global warming becomes irreversible, commonly thought of as a temperature rise of 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. So, are things moving on from Kyoto? Well, global discussions on climate change have been ongoing for the last 20 years, although as a theory it actually dates back to the 19th century. In more recent decades, scientists have been measuring the relationship between carbon levels and temperatures, with all the evidence pointing clearly to the correlation between rising greenhouse gas emissions from our use of fossil fuels and higher global temperatures. While it's true that temperatures have been rising more slowly since a spike in 1998, they haven't fallen or even paused. In 1992, the UNFCCC was created in Rio de Janeiro to get governments to agree in principle to take action to avoid dangerous climate change. The Kyoto Agreement was produced a few years later, requiring global emissions reductions of around 5% by 2012. But with plenty of disputes over which countries should bear the biggest burden of action, not to mention the refusal of the US Congress to ratify the protocol, it remained in stasis. With something of a stalemate developing, it became clear that a new approach was needed. There was a general agreement at Copenhagen by the world's biggest greenhouse gas emitters to commit to reductions, although what it didn't result in was a binding treaty. Nevertheless, the targets agreed at Copenhagen in the form of a document signed by world leaders still stand. The EU and US have all agreed to cut their emissions by between 26% and 40%, with China agreeing to reach its emissions peak by 2030. All the major and developing countries also have targets as well as pledges to increase low-carbon energy or conserve forests. One of the key clauses of a Paris Agreement would be to introduce a 5-year target review with a view to revising them upwards. Poorer countries will need help to finance investment in clean technologies, though who might foot the bill for this has been a bone of contention. Heads of state, including Barack Obama, Xi Jinping of China, Narendra Modi of India, Angela Merkel of Germany, and David Cameron of the UK will all attend, despite the recent terrorist attacks on the French capital, and are confident a deal can be made. Security will be unprecedented, and no doubt the current somber mood in the city will affect the delegates. But it may also spur governments on to find and agree common goals for the future well-being of the planet. That's all for now. Join us later this week for another Bank of Cardiff newscast. And remember that all our newscasts are available on our website, www.bankofcardiff.com/newscasts.